Dolby Atmos is primarily a speaker format, but one of the great things about Atmos is it allows people to actually experience Atmos content on headphones. For a lot of engineers getting started in Atmos, headphones seems like a really good way to get started, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. But at the end of the day, you do have to remember that Atmos is a speaker format. Whatever you do needs to get checked on speakers before it goes out into the world. So today, I want to offer some tips for you if you are just working in Atmos in headphones, whether you're just getting started or you're not ready to invest in a full-blown speaker setup. These are some tips to kind of help keep you out of the weeds. These tips are probably going to be a little conservative, but I think that's important when you can't quite hear everything until you are sort of used to experiencing things on speakers and used to understanding how everything translates. You might want to play it a little safer. So let's jump in, look at some tips that might help you mix in headphones. First tip is make sure that your trims and down mixes are set up properly. I hear from a lot of engineers, they don't even know about these and don't even know that they should touch them and change them up. So this is important to get right. I'm using the Dolby Atmos renderer here. If you are using an internal renderer in your DAW, there should be similar controls in there. First up, I've got my down mix for 5.1, 5.1X. It's set to direct render with room balance. Some labels might prefer that you are delivering with direct render. Personally, I think this one sounds better. Just a taste thing though, and my opinion. If somebody asked me to deliver with direct render instead of this, I would do it. It's not a hill for me to die on. But the other big thing that you want to adjust for music mixing in Dolby Atmos is all of these trim controls for the down mixes. And typically you want to get your surround and height trims at 0. So 0 for 5.1.4, 0 for 7.1, 0 for 5.1.2. All of these you probably want set to 0. The front and back balance, you probably don't want to mess with that. It can do some interesting things. So I'd stay away from that, especially when you don't have speakers to monitor this. Tip number 2, when you are panning something to a static position, you want to keep it on the walls. And what we mean by the walls is we want to stay on the edge of the perimeter of the Atmos space. I've just got a guitar up here. And I personally tend to do static positions to one of these locations. In my setup right here, this is actually sending to a 9.1.6 bus, which is why I can see these extra 2 speakers here. Those are for the wide positions in a 9.1.x setup. The reason you want to do this is because when we start sending a source to multiple speakers, depending on where a listener is sitting, if a sound is coming from multiple speakers, there can be phase problems as a result of that, because the timing difference for that listener is going to change relative to each speaker based on where they're sitting. This is something that is a moving target because it's really dependent on the listening environment where somebody's listening, whether they're in their living room or a home theater or a car. The size of the room is going to change the distance for that person to each speaker, and the relative speaker distances, those might change a little bit. So by staying on the wall, you're going to minimize your output to really 1 or 2, maybe 3 speakers at the most. The minute you start bringing things more into the middle, especially if you're set up as an object, once you start coming into the middle, things can end up going to a lot of different speakers. And I'll just show you. I just have a guitar here soloed up and I'm sending it to an object, and what I want you to watch is the meters here. This is for a 714 output, but watch what happens as I pan this around in the space. I'm going to start in the left front, and you'll see that we're only going to get a meter on the left front, but watch what happens as I move it to different positions in the room. So like right in this position here, you can see it's in the right speaker, it's in the center speaker, it's in the left side, it's in the right side. That is a recipe for phase problems, because if I move around in the space as a listener, I'm changing my location, my distance to each of those speakers relatively. I'm going to get closer to one and not the other. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a time arrival differentiation between all of those different speakers, which might result in phase cancellation in that sound. And as I mentioned, it's going to be different no matter what room you're in. So on the other hand, if you just stay in one place, you can see as I'm panning to these different locations, it's really only coming into one speaker or two. Now, if I pan to the wide in here, since I don't have a 916, the output is going to be in the right and the right side. But that's only two locations. That's not going to create as big of an issue as when we get into 3 or 4 or more speakers. If I start raising this up, so when I'm panned in this position, you can just see there are a lot of meters going for speaker outputs. That is a potential for a lot of phase issues. Now, one thing I want to mention is this doesn't mean you can't move things. If you have something in motion and it is going across the sound field, that's okay. The phase issues that are going to happen from moving, they're going to be passing. They're going to happen quickly. It's not going to be a big deal. You can definitely move things through the space when you're panning. But if you have something and it's just sitting somewhere in the mix, you're better off having it on the wall than having it out into the space. Something you have to understand with Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos does not emulate proximity. We can't make something closer to us just by panning it more to the center. All Atmos panning is level. We can adjust some of the distance a little bit with binaural settings, but it's still not going to put it like right here versus right here. That's not the way it works. That's not the way our perception of distance works. All we can do is kind of move it around. It's purely level-based panning. It does not do proximity. So keep that in mind. If you want to get something closer or further away, we have techniques with reverbs, delays, equalization level. These techniques that we've used for decades, they still apply in Dolby Atmos. So you're better off reaching into that bag of techniques than trying to pan it and bring it closer, because that's just not the way Atmos works, number one. And number two, you don't know that the listener is always going to be right in the middle. Sure, if somebody's in headphones, that's probably going to be the case. But the minute you get outside of headphones, once you get into things like car audio, home theaters, someone's living room setup with a sound bar, you don't know exactly where they're going to be sitting. So to me, it's not a good idea to bank on somebody being right dead smack in the middle of everything. All right, tip number 3. In general, you probably want to keep the more important elements of your mix towards the front of the space. When I'm listening, I want to be looking in the direction of where the important things are. So Lead vocal is a great example. Drums, like rhythmic elements that are really driving the song. A lot of times I feel like it's better to keep those more towards the front. And these are things that if you're on a speaker setup, you can experiment with, and you can find sometimes it's nice to break out past that. But since you're working on headphones, you're going to have a harder time understanding how does something like that really translate into speakers. So in general, keep the important stuff up front. Lead vocals, main melodic information, main rhythmic elements, kick and snare, things like that. They're probably going to do better in the front. All right, tip number 4 is I think it's a good idea to distribute energy throughout the space. When it comes to Atmos mixes, any Atmos mix, really, music, film, TV, but especially with music, I think front-loaded Atmos mixes are boring. They're not as engaging. They're not as immersive sounding. I think bringing everything into the space, it's more engaging. It's more enjoyable to listen to. When it comes to things like film and TV, a lot of times some of those mixes tend to be a little more front-loaded because they're actually trying to connect the sound to something you see on the screen. It doesn't make sense to have something be on the screen and have the sound coming from behind you. That doesn't work. When we get into music mixes, though, we don't have that same kind of context to worry about. With music, we can be a lot more, liberal in terms of placing things into the space. What I want to show you is I have some keyboards and guitars here. Grab your headphones because we're going to listen to some binaural audio here. I'm going to play you these guitars and keyboards just with everything panned to the front, and then I'm going to spread it out into the space so you can hear the difference. So headphones on, here we go. This is with everything panned to the front. All right, now I'm going to distribute things through the space. So I'll take the guitars. We'll put those in the wide speakers. Take this guitar stem and put it in back. The piano, I'm going to put that in the sides. And then this keyboard stem, that is going to go up top. And I'm going to kind of automate it so it's going around. So here is with all of the keyboards and guitars spread throughout the space. Again, binaural. So to me, it feels a little more open. It doesn't feel like things are stepping on each other as much. It's more immersive this way. And that's just on the headphones and binaural. In the room, in speakers, it feels so much better to have everything spread out and more all around. Now, I still want to keep the important things more towards the front, but I like to spread the energy around the space as much as I can, as much as works for the context of the music I'm working on. To me, that is much more engaging. Tip number 5, this is really important. You have to get your mix checked on speakers. Whether you take it to a studio that has a full Atmos setup to listen, or you talk to another engineer like myself, or just someone you can partner with, it's really important that you get your mix checked on speakers. This is a service that I provide. You can visit my website, staglproductions.com, to contact me if you want to get some help. I check Atmos mixes for people all the time, and I also can do mastering for Atmos. So if that's something that I can help you with, great. There might be another engineer in your town who can help you as well, and that you can actually just go to the studio. But either way, make sure that your mix gets checked on speakers before you release it. That is going to be the best way to guarantee that your mix is going to work on speakers and in headphones. So I hope this helps. I hope it gives you some ideas. If you've got questions, comments, things that you've found work good for working in headphones, please leave them below. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.